Illiva shone through the window, lighting the office of the captain. Her rays spread a pleasant warmth through the room. The office was rather small, barely 4 meters across. It was modestly furnished. A desk near the center of the room and a bookcase opposite the window were the only real furniture to be found. Nelren stood in the center of the room, before the desk. The captain was seated there, bent over a bunch of paperwork. The elderly man seemed tired. The last couple of days had been rough. The city's most popular establishment had gone up in flames. A fire which had managed to spread to a few buildings before it, with the help of some rain, had been put under control. Then, if that wasn't enough, mages as well, and one still at large. "Your report, Mr. Durai," the captain said, still looking at the papers. "The 6th Guard Regiment has been searching through the Western District, and the 5th have been searching through the Southern. So far they have not found a trace of the other. And the innkeeper, Mrs. Allaire, said that they arrived at the inn shortly before the fire. They bought food and drink and rented a room. Any links between them and the fire?" "None that I can see, sir. Irene said that 2 others, a pair of thugs, tried to extort her just before the blaze. Apparently they have tried to press her for money for some time now." "Extortion? Why did she not tell us she was being extorted?" "Any information on these thugs?" "None, Captain." The captain sighed. Well, we'll have to look into it. This is the 3rd building. But one thing at a time. Take the 7th Regiment. Search through the Temple District. The other mage is still out there." Nelren looked questioningly at the captain. "The Temple District, sir?" Well, our prisoner had a note in his pocket. A note signed Helthur Lithsvud. I guessed it was from when he visited the temple some 20 years ago, so I had your father confirm if our 2 mages had been to the temple. He confirmed it. They were there. They sought knowledge about Helthur. He had not given them permission to the library, but it seems your sister managed to get them in anyway." Nelren shook his head, rubbing his forehead. Of course Anea would. "Your father will be paying a fine. He knew who they were, at least the one in our cell, yet did not report them." "And who is in our cell?" The captain looked up. His eyes were strained. "His name is Thaelen Vitari Evair, an Elrian noble." "Vitari Evair?" "Yes, the son of Archmage Emyn Evair and former Archmage Ithanor Vitari." Nelren looked down. So we have the grandson of the Ilmirian Empress in our prison? The captain nodded. We do. Nelren looked out of the window, his eyes passing over the rooftops. After a while, he spoke. Do we know who the last one is? No, the captain said, shaking his head. Which makes her even more dangerous. Now see to it that every nook and cranny of the temple district is searched. Aye, Captain. Before Nelren could leave, however, the captain handed him a rolled piece of parchment. Here, before you go, could you please bring this order to Executioner Wraith on your way out? Execution orders? Nelren asked. For the one in our cell. But Captain, he's not Daerian. By law he's to be banished, not executed. The captain looked tired. Under normal circumstances, yes. But after Helthur Liftswid's little charade, Grand Duchess Thaelen made an exception to the mages of the Mages Guild of Elren. Any mage of their order without permission to be here is to face the gallows. There was a sudden flutter from the window, as if a bird had taken off. Both turned in the direction. There was nothing there. My hands are tied here, Nelren, the captain said at length. I have confirmed it with her. It's her order, not mine. Nelren was silent for a moment, then bowed and left the office. Anea gazed out over Daeroll, leaning on the stone railing of a balcony high up in the temple tower. Her eyes went to the city's heart, where a tall tower rose. It was silhouetted against the setting sun. The tower's base was wider than its top, which rose many meters up. Buttresses supported the walls, each rising to a spire. The domed roof was of copper, that once would have glimmered in the evening. Now it was a dull, weathered green, grime lining the old plate. Once it had been the local seat for the ancient arcane order of Thaelen. Now it was the Grand Duchy's center of administration, and the home of the Grand Duchess. You are too hard on your father, Anea, the dwarf said. She looked over her shoulder. The dwarf was walking up to her. His face was tired, and his brown beard, usually so neatly combed, was tangled. He held 2 goblets, each filled with wine. Her father, the high priest, had not waited to chastise her. As his daughter he could no longer punish her, but as a priestess under his jurisdiction he could. He did what he had to do. You know he can't show favor. It wouldn't be fair on the other priests. She didn't respond. Here, he said, handing her one of the goblets. She drank of the wine, still unspeaking. They stood in silence, gazing out over the city. She directed her gaze to the southwest. There, in the southern end of the square of Elidas, the blackened remains of the inn stood. The thunderous sound had been heard even at the temple. Thaelen Ilmirus Hirion Vitaria Veir. To think that he was in my library, Galsrune said with a short chuckle. Ilstia's grandson. Galsrune. They gazed back. Her father and brother had come into the room. The high priest wore his white robes, the gold embroidery glinting in the setting sun. Her brother was off duty, and did not wear his guard uniform. Instead he wore a plain, but fair, shirt, and a pair of linen trousers. I need to speak with you for a moment. High Priest Caliph, the dwarf said. Good evening, Nelren, he added. The young man gave him a courteous nod. Galsrune went back inside, leaving Ane on the balcony. Her gaze fell once more on the tower at the city's heart, but her thoughts strayed onto the news. Irene was as close as family, and she had rushed to the inn the moment she had been given the chance. From Irene and her husband she had heard of the events, even before it had become widespread knowledge. Then there was the most recent news. Talk of the coming execution had spread fast, faster perhaps than the news of the fire. It wasn't fair, she thought, that he should be punished for saving a child. Nor had he or the other killed anyone. Good evening, sister. She turned. Nelren stood in the opening. Good evening. There's no need to stand on the balcony all alone. Come on. She sighed, then went inside. The room was circular, 29 meters across, the same as the tower itself. A stair led down in the room's far end. In the heart of the room was a circular table, several chairs placed around its curve. Many windows let light into the space, and lanterns hung along its walls for when Iliva had set. It was the council chamber, where the high priest and the other important temple members would gather for meetings. Her father and grandfather stood near the table. The dwarf sighed. Well, Caliph, I fear war is imminent now. War? Anea asked as she approached. Yes, Anea, war. Empress Ilistia is not going to take the execution of her grandson well. She is an empress of war, with the full might of one of the world's greatest empires at her fingertips. Are you certain they would risk war? Nelren asked. Nelren, I know you are proud of this land. Galsrune began. They would not need to risk war. You have not seen their armies in action. I have. Furthermore, they have magic. We do not. And whatever you may think of it, it does give them an advantage. But why execute him then? Surely the oh-so-wise Grand Duchess would know this. Anea said. Pride, I would guess. Galsrune said. And her pride will bear dire consequences. The consequences would be dire indeed, someone said from the balcony. They turned towards the balcony. There, leaning her back against the railing, stood a woman with uncombed, fiery hair, the slight curls swaying in the breeze. She had faded freckles on her cheeks. Her grey eyes passed from one of them to the next, lingering on Nelren. There was a fire in them that shook him to his core. Her face was upturned, so that she looked down on them. Instinctively, Nelren went to draw his sword, but grasped at nothing. He scowled at her, then turned towards Caliph. The guards, now! You really think they'll be able to get here in time? She asked, shaking her head. I'll just fly away. Nelren gazed at her. What do you want? He asked at length. To save the one I love from your barbarian laws. And you want our help? The high priest asked. Why would any of us help you, mage? Nelren blurted, his eyes fixed on her. Taylor turned to gaze out over the city. For them, she said. She turned back towards them. If Thaelen is... She trailed off. It's they who will suffer. Nelren's gaze fell to the floor. Galsrune looked at her, an eye raised. Who are you? The dwarf asked. Smiling, she said. Lady Taylor Arinda, granddaughter of Duchess Lihon Arinda of Lethdan. Well, I'll be. Not only did I have the grandson of Ilistia in my library, but also an Arinda. Who she is in Elrin does not matter. Here she's a criminal. Nelren said, gazing up again. Taylor's eyes narrowed.
You dare call me a criminal? In this land, yes.
Brother, Anea began, our mother taught us to help people. He turned towards his sister.
It was magic that killed her, and you want me to help a mage?
Anea scowled at him.
Magic? You know who killed her, and it wasn't magic. She made her choice and faced the consequences, he replied. She only wanted to help people, Anea shouted. She fell to temptation, Nelren began. Speak not of her like that, Nelren, Caliph blurted. Not of your own mother. Not in front of me.
Nelren fell silent. Daelia gazed at the siblings. She kept her countenance in check, but was shocked at the sudden hostility between them.
At length Caliph spoke. And what would you have us do, Lady Arinda? Thaelen sits in a well-guarded prison behind 2 city walls.
Daelia considered this for a moment, then said,
Well, the help of a guard that knows the prison would certainly be useful. Caliph's eyes passed to his son. At first Nelren said nothing. Then he walked off towards the stairs. I will play no part in this, he said. You claim to follow the example of Emelos, brother,
Anea said.
Would he, the protector of the weak and helpless, turn his back on the people like this? Think of them, Nelren. Do they deserve to suffer? Do they deserve the war that would come from this?
He stopped before the stairs, gazing down, down into the growing darkness of the stairway. The gloom of evening was setting in.
Furthermore, he did save Brel.
Nelren closed his eyes. The seconds dragged on. He sighed.
Fine. But not to save this half-elf. Only to safeguard the people of this city and country. Anea gave her brother a smile. He did not return it. Daelia smirked, ever so slightly.
Thaelen walked back and forth. The cell wasn't that large, a little under 3 by 3 meters. In the middle of one of the walls was the door, a sturdy wooden door, obviously locked. Opposite it was a small window with metal bars before it. Beneath the window stood a bench that also served as a bed. A small table stood near a wall. He sat down. The last 2 days had been hard, and he had hardly slept. His thoughts often wandered to his fate. His chest tightened, panic rising. He had heard that hangings were neither fast nor painless. He breathed, trying to calm down. Thaela wouldn't just leave him to his fate. She wouldn't. Surely she would have a plan, or something. He tried to think on other matters. He had overheard some of the guards talking about the fire. Some believed it was connected to some group that had taken control of much of the city's criminal underground, a syndicate of some kind. The guards had described them as ruthless. A few hideouts had been busted, but it seemed not enough to stem the tide of violence. His attention was drawn by 3 taps on the window. A falcon had perched itself on the outside windowsill. He stood up on the bench and looked through the glass. He recognized the falcon immediately. "Thaela," he whispered. The falcon tapped 4 more times on the window. Tap, 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 then flew away. It was a code they had made when they were children. 4 taps with that specific rhythm meant play along. What did she mean? Play along with what? Clearly she wasn't just going to let him be executed. He sat back down, scratching his chin. A beard had begun to grow. He had planned to shave before they'd leave the city. He sighed. He hoped that whatever plan she had come up with was good. Because otherwise... He took another deep breath, trying to calm down.